Welcome, weary soul, to the ancient mysteries that lie hidden within the very stones of Hyrule Castle. Tonight, we shall explore the forgotten legends carved into its foundations, the secrets whispered through its corridors, and the eternal vigil that echoes from its towers. This is a journey through sacred architecture and divine purpose, where every stone holds memory and every shadow carries the weight of ages. Let your mind drift as we descend into the deepest mysteries of the kingdom's heart, where earthly power meets celestial wisdom. Long before the first stones of Hyrule Castle were set in place by mortal hands, long before any royal banner had ever fluttered from its towers, or any crown had graced the brow of a Hyrulean monarch, the rocky foundation upon which this great fortress would one day stand held secrets that reached back to the very dawn of the world itself. The geological formation that would become the seat of divine authority was no accident of nature, but a carefully chosen site that seemed to exist at the intersection of multiple realms of power and significance. The ancient plateau rose from the heart of Hyrule like a great altar offered to the heavens, its stone composition unlike anything found elsewhere in the kingdom. Where other regions boasted soft limestone or common granite, this particular formation consisted of a unique crystalline rock that seemed to hold light within its very structure, reflecting and amplifying the sacred energies that flowed through the land, like underground rivers of pure divine essence. Geologists and scholars in later ages would puzzle over the origins of this remarkable stone, for it bore characteristics that suggested both natural formation and deliberate craftsmanship on a scale that defied easy comprehension. The rock layers revealed patterns too regular to be entirely natural, yet too ancient to have been shaped by any known civilization. It was as if the earth itself had been preparing this place for millennia, slowly sculpting the perfect foundation for something that would one day bridge the gap between mortal ambition and divine will. The earliest inhabitants of what would become Hyrule had recognized the spiritual significance of this place long before they possessed the knowledge or resources to build upon it. Ancient petroglyphs, worn smooth by countless centuries of wind and weather, could still be found carved into the living rock in the deepest chambers beneath the castle. These primitive symbols spoke of a people who understood that they stood in the presence of something sacred, something that demanded reverence and careful stewardship rather than casual exploitation. These pre-kingdom peoples had built simple shrines and meditation circles on the plateau, their rough-hewn stones arranged in patterns that seemed to follow the natural energy flows of the location itself. They understood, with the intuitive wisdom that comes from living close to the land, that certain places held concentrations of spiritual power that could be harnessed for healing, prophecy, and communion with the divine forces that shaped their world. Archaeological evidence suggested that these early settlements had been remarkably peaceful, their inhabitants sustained not through conquest or trade, but through some form of harmony with the natural and supernatural forces that converged at this unique location. They left behind no weapons of war, no fortifications against enemies, no signs of the conflicts that plagued other early civilizations. Instead, their artifacts spoke of a people dedicated to contemplation, star-watching, and the careful preservation of ancient wisdom that had been passed down through countless generations. The Sheikah, those mysterious shadow folk whose knowledge would later prove instrumental in both the kingdom's greatest triumphs and its most terrible defeats, had discovered this place during their own ancient wanderings across the land. Their arrival marked the beginning of a new phase in the plateau's history, as their advanced understanding of both natural and supernatural forces allowed them to perceive layers of significance that had remained hidden from earlier inhabitants. The shadow folk had recognized immediately that the unique properties of the crystalline rock made it an ideal foundation for structures that needed to channel and focus mystical energies. They had built their first astronomical observation platforms here, great circles of precisely cut stone that allowed them to track the movements of celestial bodies with an accuracy that would not be matched by other civilizations for thousands of years. These ancient Sheikah astronomers had understood that the plateau's position allowed for observations that were impossible from any other location in the known world. The combination of elevation, the specific mineral composition of the underlying rock, and the convergence of natural energy flows created conditions that seemed to thin the barriers between the physical and spiritual realms. On certain nights, when atmospheric conditions were perfect and the celestial alignments were favorable, observers claimed they could see not just the stars themselves but the patterns of fate and destiny that flowed between them. The astronomical observations conducted at this site had formed the foundation of the Sheikah understanding of time, prophecy, and the cyclical nature of history itself. They had learned to read the movement of stars and planets as a vast clockwork mechanism that governed the ebb and flow of light and darkness in the world below. Their calculations, preserved in stone tablets and crystal repositories that would survive for millennia, predicted the return of ancient evils and the appearance of chosen heroes with an accuracy that seemed to transcend normal human understanding. But the Sheikah had been more than mere observers of celestial mechanics. They had discovered that the plateau's unique properties could be enhanced and directed through careful architectural intervention. By cutting chambers and passages into the living rock according to specific geometric patterns, they could create spaces where the natural energy flows were concentrated and purified, where communion with divine forces became not just possible, but inevitable for those with the proper knowledge and preparation. The deepest chambers they had carved into the plateau's heart had served as repositories for their most sacred artifacts and closely guarded secrets. Here, in spaces that existed at the boundary between the earthly and divine realms, they had preserved knowledge that would prove crucial to the survival of the kingdom in its darkest hours. The walls of these chambers had been covered with inscriptions in their flowing script, texts that recorded not just scientific observations but prophecies, warnings, and instructions for future generations who would inherit their awesome responsibilities. These ancient Sheikah had understood that their role as guardians of sacred knowledge was not temporary but eternal, that the wisdom they accumulated through their observations and experiments would need to be preserved and protected across ages of change and upheaval. They had built into the very structure of their underground chambers mechanisms that would ensure the survival of their most important discoveries, even if their civilization itself should fall to conquest, corruption, or the simple passage of time. The decision to eventually build the royal castle upon this foundation had not been made lightly or without understanding of the profound responsibilities it would entail. The early kings of Hyrule, guided by the wisdom of their Sheikah advisors, had recognized that a throne built upon such sacred ground would carry with it obligations that transcended normal political authority. A ruler who sat upon a seat of power constructed over these ancient foundations would become not just a political leader, but a spiritual guardian, responsible for maintaining the balance between earthly governance and divine will. The architectural plans for the castle had been drawn with careful attention to the underlying sacred geometry of the Sheikah installations beneath. Every tower, every corridor, every chamber had been positioned to work in harmony with the ancient energy flows, rather than disrupting them. The castle would not simply be built upon the plateau, but would become an integral part of it, its stones growing from the living rock like some magnificent crystal formation that had been shaped by both human ambition and divine inspiration. The construction process itself had become a sacred ritual that spanned generations, with each phase of building accompanied by ceremonies designed to ensure that the growing structure remained in harmony with the spiritual forces that had made the site sacred in the first place. Master craftsmen had worked alongside Sheikah technicians to create joints and fittings that would allow the castle's stones to resonate with the crystalline frequencies of the underlying rock, creating a unified structure that amplified rather than dampened the natural energies of the location. As the castle rose from its ancient foundations, its builders had discovered chambers and passages that predated their work by thousands of years, spaces carved by the original Sheikah inhabitants, whose purposes were not always immediately apparent. Rather than destroying or sealing these mysterious chambers, the royal architects had incorporated them into their design, creating a complex layered structure where ancient wisdom coexisted with contemporary needs. The deepest levels of the castle, carved directly into the living rock of the plateau, had retained much of their original sacred character. Here, in chambers where Sheikah astronomers had once tracked the movements of celestial bodies and recorded their observations for posterity, later generations of royal scholars would continue the same essential work. The ancient stone circles used for stellar observation had been carefully preserved and integrated into the castle's design, their geometric precision and astronomical alignments too valuable to abandon or modify. These subterranean levels had also served as natural storage areas for the most precious and dangerous artifacts accumulated by the royal family across the centuries. The stable temperature, the protective properties of the crystalline rock, and the spiritual significance of the location had made these chambers ideal repositories for items that required not just physical security, but magical protection against corruption or decay. The upper levels of the castle, while built according to more conventional architectural principles, had been designed to work in harmony with the ancient foundations beneath. The throne room itself had been positioned directly above one of the most powerful convergence points identified by the original Sheikah observers, ensuring that the royal seat of power would be infused with the same mystical energies that had made the site sacred in the first place. The Triforce symbol carved into the throne room floor had not been merely decorative, but had served as a focusing mechanism that channeled and amplified these underlying forces. The towers that reached toward the heavens had been constructed with chambers and windows positioned to continue the astronomical observations that had been the site's primary purpose for thousands of years. Royal astronomers and Sheikah scholars working together had maintained an unbroken chain of celestial observation that stretched back to the earliest inhabitants of the plateau, their records forming a continuous chronicle of cosmic events that would prove invaluable in understanding and predicting the great cycles of light and darkness that governed the world's fate. The integration of ancient foundations with contemporary needs had created a structure that was far more than the sum of its parts. A castle that served simultaneously as political center, religious sanctuary, military fortress, and scientific observatory. The stones themselves had seemed to remember their ancient purpose, resonating with harmonies that enhanced both the spiritual awareness of its inhabitants and the effectiveness of the magical and technological artifacts housed within its walls. The natural springs and underground waterways that flowed through the plateau's depths had been carefully channeled and directed to serve both practical and mystical purposes. The pure water that emerged from deep within the crystalline rock carried with it traces of the same spiritual energies that made the site sacred, creating fountains and pools within the castle that served as sources of both physical sustenance and spiritual renewal. These waters had been used in the most sacred royal ceremonies, their purifying properties making them essential components of coronations, blessing rituals, and the other rites that bound the royal family to their divine mandate. The acoustic properties of the rock formation had also been remarkable, creating chambers where even whispered words could be heard with perfect clarity, and where the resonant frequencies of properly intoned prayers or incantations could be amplified to achieve effects that bordered on the miraculous. The castle's great halls had been designed to take advantage of these natural phenomena, creating spaces where royal proclamations carried not just the authority of political power, but the resonant force of divine command. As centuries passed and the castle grew through multiple phases of expansion and renovation, each generation of builders had discovered new aspects of the underlying formation's remarkable properties. Hidden chambers had been found that seemed to have been carved by forces other than conventional tools, their walls bearing crystal formations that held and reflected light in ways that defied normal understanding. Some of these spaces had been incorporated into the castle's design as meditation chambers or private sanctuaries, while others had remained sealed and protected, their purposes too mysterious or potentially dangerous to risk casual exploration. The foundation stones of Hyrule Castle had thus become far more than mere support for the structure above. They had formed the physical manifestation of a spiritual truth that had been recognized by countless generations of inhabitants. That true authority came not from human ambition alone, but from harmony between earthly power and divine will, that the most enduring structures were those built upon foundations that acknowledged and honored the sacred nature of the earth itself. The philosophy that guided the construction of Hyrule Castle as both royal residence and impregnable fortress had its roots in wisdom accumulated across countless generations of rulers who understood that true security came not from walls alone, but from the intelligent integration of defensive architecture with the natural advantages of the terrain itself. The castle that emerged from these principles was far more than a simple fortification or palace, but rather a living embodiment of strategic thinking that had been refined across centuries of both peaceful prosperity and desperate warfare. The dual pathway system that formed the architectural heart of the castle represented one of the most sophisticated approaches to internal security and efficient governance ever conceived in the kingdom's long history. This ingenious design divided the castle's interior circulation into two distinct networks that could operate independently of each other while still allowing for strategic interconnection when circumstances demanded coordination between different levels of the royal hierarchy. The passages designated for use by the royal family and their honored guests formed the primary circulatory system of the castle, grand corridors that swept through the structure with the majesty befitting those who walked them. These hallways had been designed not merely as functional spaces for movement between chambers, but as architectural statements that reinforced the dignity and divine authority of the royal bloodline with every step taken within their bounds. The floors of these royal passages had been crafted from the finest marble that could be quarried from the kingdom's most distant mountains, stone so pure and perfectly cut that it seemed to glow with its own inner light when touched by the flames of the ornate candelabra that lined the walls at regular intervals. Upon this pristine foundation lay carpets of the deepest crimson, their rich fabric woven from fibers so fine that they felt like liquid silk beneath the feet of those privileged to walk upon them. These scarlet runners were more than mere luxury, but served as visual indicators of the sacred nature of the spaces they adorned. The red that dominated the royal passages was the same shade that had been associated with divine authority since the kingdom's founding, the color of the setting sun that marked the end of each day's royal duties, and the dawn light that heralded each new opportunity to serve the goddess and the people with equal devotion. The walls that flanked these magnificent corridors rose to heights that seemed to dwarf even the tallest visitors, their surfaces adorned with tapestries and banners that told the story of the royal dynasty through carefully woven images and symbols. These textile masterpieces depicted not merely the victories and achievements of past monarchs, but also the moments of wisdom, mercy, and sacrifice that had defined the royal family's relationship with their subjects across the generations. Between the tapestries, Mounted at eye level for those who possessed the privilege of walking these halls, hung the ceremonial weapons and armor of legendary royal guards, their polished surfaces reflecting the candlelight in patterns that seemed to dance with memories of the courage and devotion they represented. These displays served both as decoration and as silent reminders of the price that had been paid in blood and sacrifice to maintain the peace and prosperity that allowed such beauty to exist. The ceilings of the royal passages soared overhead like the vaulted heavens themselves, their surfaces painted with astronomical charts and divine symbols that connected the earthly authority of the royal family with the cosmic order that governed all creation. These elaborate frescoes required constant maintenance by master artisans who understood both the technical challenges of working at such heights and the spiritual significance of every symbol and constellation they preserved. The lighting of these grand corridors had been designed to create an atmosphere of serene majesty that enhanced both the dignity of those who used them and the beauty of the architectural details that surrounded them. Great windows set with colored glass allowed natural light to filter through during the day, casting jewel-toned patterns across the marble floors that shifted and changed with the movement of the sun across the sky. In contrast to the magnificent royal passages, the soldier corridors that formed the castle's secondary circulation system had been designed according to entirely different principles that prioritized function, efficiency, and tactical advantage over aesthetic beauty. These narrower pathways threaded through the castle's structure like a network of arteries, allowing the castle's military defenders to move quickly and discreetly between strategic positions without disrupting the ceremonial functions of the royal spaces. The floors of the soldier passages consisted of dressed stone blocks that had been cut and fitted with mathematical precision, their surfaces textured to provide secure footing, even when wet with rain that might have blown through arrow slits, or when slick with the controlled urgency that characterized military movement during times of crisis. These stones bore the scars and wear patterns of countless generations of guards who had walked these routes during their daily patrols, their boots gradually polishing the stone to a subtle gleam that spoke of decades of dedicated service. The walls of these utilitarian corridors rose only high enough to allow armed soldiers to move comfortably while carrying their weapons and equipment. Their surfaces constructed from the same crystalline rock that formed the castle's foundation, but left largely unadorned, save for the occasional bracket that held torches or the small shrines where guards could offer quick prayers for protection during their watches. The lighting in the soldier passages had been designed for practicality rather than beauty, with torch brackets and oil lamp niches positioned to eliminate shadows where enemies might hide while providing steady illumination for guards who needed to identify friend from foe in an instant. The flames that burned in these fixtures cast a steady, unwavering light that allowed for quick movement and clear sightlines, while consuming fuel efficiently enough to be maintained even during extended sieges. The genius of the dual pathway system revealed itself in the carefully planned intersection points where the royal and military circulation networks connected, spaces designed to allow for the coordination between different levels of the castle's hierarchy while maintaining the security and dignity appropriate to each. These junction chambers served as controlled meeting points where royal messengers could deliver commands to military officers, where guards could report directly to royal advisors during emergencies, and where the various functions of the castle could be coordinated without compromising either the majesty of royal proceedings or the efficiency of military operations. The decorative scheme that distinguished between royal and military spaces extended far beyond the simple difference between red and blue textiles, encompassing a comprehensive visual language that allowed even unfamiliar visitors to understand immediately which areas were appropriate for their station and which were reserved for others. The symbolic vocabulary employed in this system drew upon centuries of heraldic tradition and royal iconography to create environments that reinforce social hierarchy through architectural means. The royal passages displayed heraldic banners that bore the full complexity of royal coat of arms, their rich symbolism telling the story of dynastic alliances, conquered territories, and divine mandates that had shaped the kingdom's history. These banners hung in pairs, their arrangement creating formal processional routes that guided the movement of royal ceremonies and state functions with choreographed precision. The military corridors flew simpler banners that bore the emblems of knightly orders and guard units, their colors and symbols indicating the chain of command and areas of responsibility within the castle's complex defensive structure. These displays served both decorative and functional purposes, helping to maintain unit cohesion and pride, while providing clear visual indicators of authority relationships that could be read at a glance during the confusion of emergency situations. The weapons displays that adorned the walls of both systems told complementary but distinct stories about the nature of power and protection within the castle's walls. The royal passages showcased ceremonial arms that emphasized the artistic and spiritual aspects of warfare, weapons that had been blessed in sacred ceremonies and carried by legendary heroes whose names had become synonymous with royal virtue and divine favor. The military corridors displayed practical weapons that had seen actual combat, their battle-worn surfaces telling stories of desperate defenses and hard-won victories that had preserved the kingdom's independence across the centuries. These displays served as both inspiration and instruction for the guards who walked these passages daily, reminding them of the standards they were expected to uphold and the traditions they had inherited from their predecessors. The acoustic properties of the two circulation systems had been carefully considered during their design, with the royal passages engineered to carry sound in ways that enhanced the majesty of ceremonial proceedings, while the military corridors were designed to muffle sound and prevent the accidental transmission of sensitive information. The high ceilings and hard surfaces of the royal halls created resonant chambers where proclamations and ceremonial music could fill the space with appropriate grandeur, while the lower ceilings and sound-absorbing materials of the soldier passages ensured that military communications remained secure and tactical movements could be conducted without alerting potential enemies to the castle's defensive preparations. The ventilation systems that served both networks had been integrated into the castle's overall design in ways that provided fresh air circulation while maintaining the security and climate control necessary for their different functions. The royal passages benefited from tall windows and sophisticated air channels that kept them cool in summer and comfortable in winter, while the military corridors relied on smaller openings and more direct ventilation that prioritized air quality over aesthetic considerations. The intersection of defensive architecture with natural terrain reached its most sophisticated expression in the way the castle's passages had been carved directly into the living rock of the plateau itself. This integration of artificial construction with natural formation created defensive advantages that could not be replicated through conventional building techniques, turning the very earth beneath the castle into an active component of its defensive system. The passages that wound through the solid rock followed routes that had been surveyed not only for their tactical advantages, but also for their harmony with the natural stress patterns and structural integrity of the underlying stone formation. The ancient Sheikah understanding of geological forces had informed the placement of these tunnels, ensuring that they would strengthen rather than weaken the plateau's natural stability while providing defensive positions that would remain secure even under the most extreme siege conditions. The rock-carved passages offered protection against conventional siege weapons that could devastate above-ground structures, their solid stone walls immune to fire arrows, catapult stones, and the other traditional tools of medieval warfare. These subterranean routes allowed defenders to move between defensive positions without exposure to enemy observation or attack, maintaining the element of surprise that could prove decisive in repelling invasion attempts. The natural temperature regulation provided by the surrounding rock made these passages comfortable for extended occupation during sieges, while the acoustic properties of the stone allowed for the transmission of signals and communications across distances that would have been impossible in conventional structures. Guards stationed in different sections of the underground network could coordinate their activities through a sophisticated system of knocks, calls, and echoes that turned the living rock itself into a communication medium. The storage chambers that branched off from these rock-hewn corridors provided secure repositories for the supplies and equipment necessary to sustain a prolonged defense, their naturally stable climate preserving food, weapons, and other essential materials in conditions that would have been difficult to maintain in above-ground storage areas. These chambers had been positioned according to strategic principles that ensured essential supplies would remain accessible even if portions of the castle fell to enemy control. The defensive philosophy that guided the castle's construction had recognized that true security came not from passive fortification alone, but from the ability to maintain active resistance against any conceivable threat. The dual pathway system had been designed to support both conventional, military tactics and the more subtle forms of resistance that might become necessary if the castle's outer defenses were breached. The secret passages that connected different levels and sections of the castle provided escape routes for the royal family and essential personnel, while also serving as infiltration routes that could be used to launch surprise attacks against invaders who might have gained control of the castle's main areas. These hidden ways had been constructed with multiple false entrances, dead ends, and concealed traps that would confuse and delay enemy forces while allowing authorized users to navigate them safely. The construction materials and techniques employed throughout the castle had been chosen not only for their strength and durability, but also for their ability to be modified or demolished quickly if tactical circumstances required such drastic measures. Certain corridors and chambers had been designed with structural weak points that could be collapsed to seal off sections of the castle, creating isolated defensive positions that could continue to resist even after the main fortress had been compromised. The integration of these defensive systems with the daily life of the castle required a level of planning and coordination that spoke to the sophisticated understanding of both military science and royal administration possessed by the castle's designer. The same passages that served as escape routes during emergencies functioned as service corridors during peaceful times, allowing servants and maintenance personnel to perform their duties without disrupting royal ceremonies or official functions. The wisdom embodied in Hyrule Castle's architectural design represented the accumulated experience of a civilization that had learned to balance the competing demands of beauty and security, ceremony and practicality, openness and protection. The result was a structure that served not only as an effective fortress and suitable royal residence, but as a physical embodiment of the principles upon which the kingdom itself had been founded. The understanding that true strength came from the intelligent integration of diverse elements working together toward common goals. That lasting security required both the will to defend what was precious and the wisdom to understand what was truly worth defending. The great library of Hyrule Castle stood as perhaps the most magnificent repository of knowledge and wisdom that had ever been assembled within the bounds of any single structure, its vast halls and countless chambers serving not merely as storage spaces for books and scrolls, but as living monuments to the accumulated learning of countless generations who had understood that true power flowed not from the sword alone, but from the careful preservation and application of hard-won wisdom across the turning of ages. The architectural grandeur of the library reflected the profound respect that the royal family had always held for learning and scholarship. Its soaring ceilings and graceful arches, creating spaces that seemed designed to inspire contemplation and careful study rather than the hurried consultation that characterized lesser collections. The very proportions of the great reading halls had been calculated according to principles that enhanced both acoustic clarity and visual beauty, creating environments where scholars could work for hours without fatigue, while surrounded by beauty that elevated both mind and spirit. The main hall of the library rose to heights that seemed to rival the great cathedral spaces of the most sacred temples, its walls lined from floor to distant ceiling with shelves that held volumes representing every branch of knowledge that had ever been pursued within the kingdom's borders. These towering bookcases had been crafted from wood that had been treated with preservative compounds developed by the most skilled Sheikah alchemists, ensuring that the precious volumes they supported would remain protected from decay, moisture, and the countless other threats that could destroy irreplaceable texts. The arrangement of the collection followed principles that reflected both practical accessibility and deeper symbolic meaning, with the most ancient and sacred texts occupying positions of honor at the library's heart, while more contemporary works radiated outward in carefully organized sections that allowed scholars to trace the development of ideas across centuries of accumulated wisdom. The classification system employed by the royal librarians had been refined across generations of use, creating organizational structures that made the vast collection navigable, while preserving the intellectual relationships between different areas of knowledge. At the very center of the main hall stood a great circular reading table carved from a single massive piece of the same crystalline stone that formed the castle's foundation, its surface polished to a mirror finish that seemed to gather and focus the light that streamed through the library's great windows. This table served not merely as furniture, but as a ceremonial space where the most important scholarly consultations took place, where royal decisions were informed by reference to ancient precedents and accumulated wisdom. The windows that illuminated the library had been positioned and designed according to principles that ensured optimal reading conditions throughout the day, their colored glass filtering the harsh light of midday into gentle hues that would not strain the eyes of scholars engaged in prolonged study. The patterns worked into these windows told visual stories that paralleled the written histories contained within the volumes below, creating a comprehensive environment where knowledge could be absorbed through multiple senses simultaneously. The private study chambers that branched off from the main hall provided quiet spaces where individual scholars or small groups could engage in the kind of intensive research that required freedom from distraction and interruption. These smaller rooms had been furnished with writing desks, whose surfaces bore the accumulated ink stains and knife marks of countless scholars who had used them to copy texts, compose treatises, and conduct the detailed analysis that transformed raw information into genuine wisdom. Princess Zelda's personal study occupied a position of particular significance within the library's overall design, its location chosen to provide both privacy for her scholarly pursuits and symbolic connection to the accumulated wisdom of her royal ancestors. This chamber had been arranged according to her specific needs and interests, its shelves holding the texts that related most directly to her research into ancient powers and the mystical forces that shaped the kingdom's destiny. The princess's study reflected her methodical approach to learning, with careful notes and cross-reference materials organized in ways that allowed her to track complex relationships between different sources and theories. Her writing desk bore evidence of countless hours spent in careful analysis, its surface covered with diagrams, calculations, and experimental designs that revealed the depth and sophistication of her intellectual pursuits. The books that filled her personal collection ranged from ancient prophecies written in scripts so archaic that only a handful of scholars could still read them to contemporary reports from field researchers who were investigating sites of mystical significance throughout the kingdom. This combination of historical perspective and current investigation reflected her understanding that genuine knowledge required both respect for traditional wisdom and willingness to test established theories against observable evidence. Among her most prized possessions were volumes that contained detailed descriptions of the sacred powers that had been wielded by previous generations of royal women, their pages filled with instructions, warnings, and philosophical reflections that had been passed down through the royal bloodline like precious heirlooms. These texts had been written in a mixture of formal academic language and intimate personal reflection, creating documents that served simultaneously as technical manuals and spiritual guides. The princess's research notes revealed her frustration with the gaps and inconsistencies that plagued many of the ancient sources, their authors often assuming knowledge that had been lost to subsequent generations, or describing techniques in metaphorical language that obscured practical applications. Her margins were filled with questions, alternate interpretations, and cross-references to other sources that might provide clarification or confirmation of disputed points. The secret passages that branched off from the library had been designed not merely as emergency escape routes, but as extensions of the library's function as a repository of sensitive information that required additional layers of protection beyond what conventional security could provide. These hidden corridors provided access to specialized collections that contained materials deemed too dangerous, sensitive, or valuable to be housed in the main library, where they might be accessible to unauthorized persons. The passage that lay concealed behind a seemingly ordinary bookcase had been constructed with such skill and artistry that its existence remained undetectable, even to those who knew of its general location, unless they possessed specific knowledge of the activation mechanism. The bookcase that served as its entrance had been designed to swing silently on concealed hinges when the proper sequence of volumes was manipulated, their arrangement forming a code that had been known only to the royal family and their most trusted advisors. The corridor beyond this hidden entrance descended through the living rock of the plateau according to a route that had been surveyed to avoid interfering with the castle's other subterranean features while providing secure access to chambers that served functions too sensitive for more public locations. The walls of this passage bore none of the decorative elements that characterized the library's public spaces, their rough-hewn surfaces speaking of construction undertaken in secrecy and haste. The chambers accessible through this hidden route contained collections that represented some of the kingdom's most closely guarded secrets, including texts that described the location and nature of ancient Sheikah installations throughout the realm, prophecies that spoke of future calamities with uncomfortable specificity, and technical manuals that explained the operation of magical artifacts whose power could prove catastrophic if misused. Among these restricted materials were documents that chronicled the kingdom's darkest hours, including detailed accounts of previous encounters with Calamity Ganon that had been deemed too disturbing for general knowledge, but too important for complete suppression. These records provided tactical information about the entity's capabilities and weaknesses, while also serving as warnings about the price that had been paid in previous battles against the ancient evil. The preservation techniques employed in these secret chambers surpassed even those used in the main library, with environmental controls that maintained perfect temperature and humidity, while magical wards protected the stored materials from decay, corruption, or unauthorized access. These protections had been designed to function automatically across centuries of potential neglect, ensuring that crucial information would survive, even if the kingdom itself should fall to conquest or catastrophe. The lost Great Hall of Hyrule Castle had once served as the ceremonial heart of the library system, a vast chamber where formal presentations of new knowledge took place and where the most important scholarly debates were conducted under the auspices of royal patronage. Though this magnificent space had been sealed away by the destruction wrought during the Great Calamity, its memory lived on in the accounts of those who had witnessed its glory during the kingdom's golden age. The Great Hall had been designed as an amphitheater where scholars from throughout the kingdom could gather to share their discoveries and submit their theories for peer review, its tiered seating arranged to provide excellent sightlines and acoustic clarity for audiences that sometimes numbered in the hundreds. The formal presentations that took place in this space had served not merely as academic exercises, but as crucial components of the kingdom's decision-making process, providing royal administrators with the expert analysis they needed to craft effective policies. The centerpiece of the Great Hall had been a great lectern, carved from a single piece of rare wood that had been harvested from the sacred forest. Its surface, inscribed with symbols representing every major branch of knowledge recognized by the kingdom's academic institutions. This lectern had served not merely as a speaking platform, but as a ceremonial altar where knowledge itself was honored and celebrated as one of the highest forms of service to both crown and goddess. The acoustic properties of the Great Hall had been engineered with extraordinary precision, allowing speakers to project their voices to every corner of the vast space without shouting, while ensuring that even whispered comments from the audience could be heard clearly by those responsible for maintaining order during proceedings. The curved walls and domed ceiling had been shaped according to mathematical principles that eliminated echoes and dead zones while enhancing the natural resonance of the human voice. The destruction that had sealed away the Great Hall had been sudden and complete, with structural collapses that filled the access corridors with rubble too massive and unstable to be safely cleared without risk of triggering further cave-ins. The chambers that had once echoed with the voices of the kingdom's finest minds now lay buried beneath tons of stone, their silence serving as a monument to all that had been lost when the ancient evil had broken free from its bonds. The royal records kept within the library's secure vaults represented perhaps the most complete historical archive that had ever been assembled. Their pages, chronicling not merely the major events that had shaped the kingdom's development, but also the countless small decisions and everyday occurrences that provided context and meaning to the grand sweep of historical change. These documents had been maintained according to standards that ensured both accuracy and completeness, with multiple scribes responsible for recording different aspects of royal administration and social development. The dynastic chronicles traced the lineage of the royal family back through generations that extended beyond the boundaries of reliable historical memory, their genealogical tables recording not merely names and dates but also the personal qualities, achievements, and failures that had characterized each ruler's reign. These records served both practical and ceremonial purposes, providing precedents for legal decisions while also maintaining the ceremonial traditions that reinforced royal authority. The administrative records contained detailed accounts of the kingdom's economic development, including tax records, trade agreements, and resource surveys that revealed the complex systems of production and distribution that supported the kingdom's prosperity. These documents provided crucial information for policymaking, while also serving as historical evidence of the kingdom's growth from a collection of scattered settlements into a unified realm capable of supporting large populations and sophisticated institutions. The diplomatic archives preserved the complete correspondence between the Hyrulean court and foreign powers, their contents revealing the complex web of alliances, trade relationships, and occasional conflicts that had shaped the kingdom's external relations across the centuries. These documents provided insights into the personalities and motivations of foreign rulers, while also recording the evolution of diplomatic practices and international law. The judicial records chronicled the development of the kingdom's legal system, including detailed accounts of significant court cases, the reasoning behind important legal precedents, and the ongoing refinement of laws and procedures that governed both civil and criminal matters. These materials served not merely as historical curiosities but as active resources for legal scholars and practicing jurists who needed to understand the foundations and evolution of contemporary legal practice. The scholarly treatises housed within the library represented the accumulated intellectual achievement of the kingdom's greatest minds. Their pages containing original research into subjects ranging from natural philosophy and mathematical theory to theological speculation and artistic criticism. These works had been produced by scholars working under royal patronage, their research supported by resources that allowed them to pursue knowledge for its own sake rather than merely for immediate practical application. The scientific texts included detailed observations of natural phenomena, experimental records that documented the kingdom's growing understanding of physical laws, and theoretical works that attempted to explain the underlying principles that governed both the natural and supernatural aspects of the world. These materials represented some of the most advanced scientific thinking of their time, with methodological approaches that would not be surpassed for centuries to come. The philosophical writings explored fundamental questions about the nature of existence, the relationship between mortal life and divine purpose, and the ethical principles that should guide both individual behavior and governmental policy. These treatises reflected the sophisticated intellectual culture that had flourished under royal patronage, with authors who possessed both the leisure necessary for deep reflection and access to the accumulated wisdom of previous generations. The historical analyses provided comprehensive examinations of significant events and long-term trends that had shaped the kingdom's development, their authors drawing upon primary sources and personal experience to create narratives that revealed both the immediate causes of important changes and their broader significance within the context of the kingdom's overall evolution. These works served both as educational resources and as guides for contemporary decision-makers who needed to understand historical precedents and patterns. The intersection of scholarship with royal governance had created a unique intellectual environment where theoretical knowledge and practical application informed each other in ways that benefited both academic understanding and effective administration. The scholars who worked within the castle's library system served not merely as researchers and teachers, but as advisors whose expertise influenced royal policy and helped shape the kingdom's responses to both routine challenges and unprecedented crises. The preservation of knowledge across generations required not merely adequate storage facilities and environmental controls, but also institutional structures that ensured the continuity of scholarly traditions, even when individual scholars died or retired from active service. The Royal Library had developed apprenticeship programs and succession planning that maintained expertise in crucial areas, while also encouraging innovation and the development of new approaches to perennial problems. The integration of the library system with the castle's other functions had created opportunities for scholarship that would have been impossible in more isolated academic environments, with scholars having direct access to primary sources, contemporary decision-makers, and real-world laboratories for testing their theories and recommendations. This unique position had produced intellectual achievements that represented the highest expression of the kingdom's cultural and scientific development. The loss of so much accumulated wisdom during the Great Calamity represented a tragedy whose full magnitude could only be appreciated by those who understood what had been contained within the library's vast collections. The irreplaceable manuscripts and unique documents that had been destroyed when the castle fell to corruption and malice. Yet the hidden chambers and secret archives that survived provided hope that some portion of this great treasure might yet be recovered and restored to serve future generations of scholars and rulers who would face their own challenges and require the guidance that only accumulated wisdom could provide. The extensive network of tunnels and chambers that honeycomb the rocky foundation beneath Hyrule Castle tells a story of ambition and discovery that spans generations of royal scholarship and scientific inquiry. Their winding passages and carefully excavated rooms bearing witness to one of the most comprehensive archaeological undertakings ever attempted within the bounds of the known world. These subterranean spaces, carved with painstaking care from the living rock that had supported the castle for countless centuries, represent far more than simple mining operations, but constitute instead a methodical search for knowledge and power that had consumed the energies of the kingdom's finest minds for decades. The decision to undertake large-scale excavations beneath the castle had not been made lightly or without careful consideration of the profound risks involved in such an endeavor. The royal advisors who recommended this course of action understood that disturbing the ancient foundations upon which the castle stood could potentially compromise the structural integrity of the entire fortress. Yet they also recognized that the potential rewards justified these dangers if the operation could be conducted with sufficient skill and caution. The initial surveys that preceded the excavation work had been conducted by teams of Sheikah engineers working in coordination with royal architects. Their combined expertise, allowing them to map the underground spaces in ways that identified both the most promising locations for investigation and the structural elements that could not be disturbed without risking catastrophic damage to the castle above. These preliminary studies had revealed a complex network of natural caverns and artificial chambers that suggested the presence of significant Sheikah installations dating back to the earliest periods of their civilization. The excavation techniques employed in these operations had been developed specifically for working within the unique crystalline rock formation that comprised the castle's foundation, methods that allowed for precise removal of material while preserving the structural stability of surrounding stone. The tools used for this delicate work had been crafted by the kingdom's finest smiths according to specifications provided by Sheikah technical experts, their cutting edges and leverage systems designed to work with rather than against the natural properties of the rock being excavated. The workforce assembled for these operations had included not only skilled miners and stone workers, but also scholars capable of recognizing and properly handling any artifacts or installations that might be uncovered during the excavation process. This combination of practical expertise and academic knowledge had been essential for ensuring that important discoveries were not damaged or destroyed through careless handling during the excavation work itself. The systematic approach taken to these excavations had involved dividing the area beneath the castle into carefully surveyed sections, each of which was investigated according to a methodical plan that prioritized areas most likely to yield significant discoveries while maintaining adequate safety margins around critical structural elements. The progress of work in each section had been documented with meticulous care, creating detailed records of what was found at each level and location within the expanding network of tunnels and chambers. The first major discoveries had emerged from excavations conducted directly beneath the castle's great tower, where workers had uncovered evidence of Sheikah construction that predated the castle itself by thousands of years. These ancient installations had been built according to architectural principles that seemed to blend practical engineering with mystical symbolism. Their geometric patterns and precisely calculated proportions suggesting purposes that went far beyond mere structural utility. The chambers revealed by these early excavations had contained artifacts and inscriptions that provided unprecedented insights into the advanced technological capabilities possessed by the ancient Sheikah. Their crystalline storage devices and mechanical computing systems, representing levels of sophistication that contemporary scholars could barely comprehend, despite years of careful study. These discoveries had confirmed the historical accounts that described the shadow folk as masters of both mystical arts and practical sciences, their achievements representing a synthesis of spiritual wisdom and technical knowledge that had never been equaled. The excavation work had proceeded through multiple phases, each building upon the discoveries and insights gained from previous investigations, while pushing deeper into the rocky foundation in search of installations that were believed to exist at even greater depths. The tunnels that emerged from this systematic approach had been reinforced with carefully fitted stone blocks and wooden supports that maintained their structural integrity, while providing safe access for researchers and workers who needed to move equipment and materials through the underground network. The minecart tracks that had been installed throughout the tunnel system represented one of the most sophisticated transportation solutions ever developed for underground operations. Their narrow-gauge rails allowing for the efficient movement of personnel and materials across distances that would have been prohibitively difficult to traverse on foot. These rails had been manufactured according to specifications that took into account both the weight-bearing requirements of loaded carts and the precise clearances necessary for safe operation within the confined spaces of the tunnel network. The engineering challenges involved in installing these transportation systems had required innovative solutions to problems of grade management, curve radius calculation, and load distribution that had pushed the boundaries of contemporary knowledge in multiple technical disciplines. The rail system that emerged from these efforts had been capable of supporting operations on a scale that would have been impossible using conventional manual transportation methods, allowing for the removal of vast quantities of excavated material while bringing in the heavy equipment and supplies necessary for deeper exploration. The power systems that operated the mining equipment had been based on a combination of traditional mechanical principles and Sheikah technological innovations, creating hybrid solutions that leveraged the best aspects of both approaches while avoiding the limitations that had constrained previous excavation efforts. The water wheel installations that provided mechanical power for lifting systems and ventilation equipment had been integrated with Sheikah energy storage devices that could maintain operations even when natural water flow was insufficient to meet power requirements. The ventilation systems developed for the deep excavations had incorporated principles derived from both traditional mining practices and Sheikah atmospheric manipulation technologies, creating environments that remained safe and comfortable for workers, despite the challenges posed by depth, humidity, and the potential accumulation of dangerous gases. These systems had included not only conventional air shafts and circulation fans, but also mystical air purification devices that could remove contaminants and maintain optimal atmospheric composition at levels far below the surface. The lighting installations that illuminated the tunnel network had represented another successful integration of conventional and mystical technologies, with traditional oil lamps and torches supplemented by Sheikah luminescent crystals that provided steady, clean light without the fire hazards and air quality issues associated with conventional combustion-based illumination. These hybrid lighting systems had been designed to provide adequate visibility for both routine work and emergency situations while minimizing the logistical challenges of fuel supply and maintenance. The astral observatory that had been discovered during the deepest phases of the excavation work had represented perhaps the most significant archaeological find in the kingdom's recorded history. Its pristine condition and sophisticated equipment providing unprecedented insights into the astronomical knowledge and observational capabilities possessed by the ancient Sheikah. This remarkable installation had been built according to principles that demonstrated a level of understanding about celestial mechanics and stellar observation that far exceeded anything achieved by contemporary astronomers. The observatory's primary viewing chamber had been carved from solid rock, according to geometric specifications that enhanced its acoustic properties while providing optimal conditions for astronomical observation. Its curved walls and precisely calculated dome, creating an environment that seemed to exist at the boundary between earthly and celestial realms. The chamber's dimensions and proportions had been based on mathematical relationships that reflected the ancient Sheikah understanding of cosmic harmonies and the connections between celestial movements and terrestrial events. The observation equipment discovered within the observatory had included mechanical devices whose complexity and precision rivaled the finest clockwork mechanisms produced by contemporary craftsmen, their bronze and crystal components still functioning perfectly despite having remained unused for millennia. These instruments had been designed to track the movements of stars, planets, and other celestial bodies with an accuracy that allowed for predictions and calculations that would have been impossible using less sophisticated equipment. The record-keeping systems employed by the ancient astronomers had included both traditional written documentation and more exotic storage methods that employed crystalline matrices capable of preserving vast amounts of observational data in compact, durable formats. These crystal archives had contained astronomical observations spanning thousands of years, their contents providing evidence of cyclical patterns and long-term trends that had formed the basis for the prophetic capabilities that had made the ancient Sheikah legendary throughout the known world. The star charts and celestial maps discovered within the observatory had revealed the extent to which the ancient Sheikah had understood the connections between astronomical events and terrestrial phenomena. Their careful documentation of eclipses, planetary alignments, and stellar configurations, providing evidence of scientific methodologies that had anticipated many of the principles underlying contemporary astronomical practice. These documents had also contained prophetic interpretations that linked specific celestial events to historical developments with an accuracy that seemed to transcend normal predictive capabilities. The construction techniques employed in building the observatory had demonstrated mastery of engineering principles that allowed for the creation of spaces that remained stable and functional despite being carved from solid rock at considerable depth below the surface. The precision with which the chamber walls had been shaped and finished had created acoustic properties that enhanced both the clarity of whispered conversations and the resonant effects of ceremonial chanting, suggesting that the space had served both scientific and mystical functions. The access systems that connected the observatory to the surface had included mechanical lifting devices that could transport personnel and equipment across the considerable vertical distance that separated the underground installation from the castle above. These elevators had been powered by counterweight systems that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of mechanical advantage and load distribution. Their smooth operation, maintained through the use of bearing systems and lubrication techniques that had remained effective across millennia of dormancy. The Guardian storage chambers that had been discovered adjacent to the observatory had contained dozens of the mechanical warriors in various states of assembly and completion, their presence providing evidence that the ancient Sheikah had been conducting research and development activities related to these advanced weapon systems for extended periods prior to their eventual deployment in the Great Battle against Calamity Ganon. The conditions within these storage areas had been so carefully controlled that many of the Guardians had remained in pristine condition despite their great age. The manufacturing facilities associated with these storage chambers had included workshops equipped with tools and equipment designed for the precision assembly and maintenance of Guardian components, their specialized machinery representing technological capabilities that contemporary craftsmen could barely comprehend despite careful examination and study. These workshops had contained partially completed Guardian units, along with stockpiles of components and raw materials that provided insights into the manufacturing processes employed by the ancient Sheikah. The research laboratories that had been integrated into the underground complex had contained experimental equipment and documentation that revealed the extent of Sheikah investigations into the mystical properties of various materials and energy sources, their work encompassing both practical applications and theoretical research that had pushed the boundaries of contemporary understanding. These laboratories had been equipped with containment systems and safety measures that demonstrated awareness of the potential dangers associated with their experimental work. The excavation records that documented the discovery of these installations had described the careful procedures employed to ensure that ancient systems and artifacts were not damaged during the uncovering process, with teams of specialists working to preserve both the physical integrity of discovered materials and the environmental conditions necessary for their continued operation. These procedures had included atmospheric monitoring, structural stabilization, and the gradual exposure of sensitive equipment according to protocols designed to minimize shock and degradation. The integration of newly discovered ancient Sheikah installations with contemporary research efforts had required the development of new methodologies that could bridge the technological gap between ancient capabilities and current understanding, creating hybrid approaches that leveraged the strengths of both systems while avoiding potential incompatibilities that could result in equipment damage or operational failures. These integration efforts had been led by teams that included both traditional scholars and Sheikah technical specialists, whose ancestral knowledge provided crucial insights into the operation of discovered systems. The security measures that had been implemented to protect the underground installations from unauthorized access had included both conventional physical barriers and mystical protection systems that could distinguish between authorized personnel and potential intruders, their automated responses calibrated to provide appropriate levels of deterrence without endangering legitimate researchers or maintenance personnel. These security systems had been designed to function independently of external power sources and command structures, ensuring their continued effectiveness even during periods of political instability or external threat. The profound implications of the discoveries made during the excavation operations had extended far beyond their immediate scientific and technical value, providing evidence of historical patterns and cyclical events that had shaped the kingdom's development in ways that had not been previously understood. The knowledge gained from these investigations had influenced royal policy and strategic planning in fundamental ways, creating new awareness of both opportunities and threats that required careful consideration in the formulation of long-term governmental objectives. The ultimate tragedy of these magnificent underground installations lay not in their initial concealment or the difficulties involved in their rediscovery, but in the recognition that they represented capabilities and knowledge that had been largely lost to contemporary understanding. Their technological sophistication and mystical integration, representing achievements that current practitioners could barely comprehend, despite years of careful study and analysis. The excavation work that had revealed these marvels had also highlighted the extent to which the kingdom's current capabilities fell short of those possessed by their ancient Sheikah predecessors, creating both inspiration for future development and sobering awareness of how much had been lost to the passage of time and the vicissitudes of historical change. The hidden docks that lay concealed beneath the castle's northeastern foundations represented one of the most ingenious and carefully guarded secrets in the entire fortress complex, their existence known only to the royal family and their most trusted advisors, their purpose so sensitive that even the detailed architectural records maintained by the castle's builders contained only oblique references to waterway access points that served unspecified emergency functions. These subterranean harbours had been carved from the living rock with the same meticulous attention to both functionality and concealment that characterized all the castle's most critical defensive installations. The waterways that fed these hidden docks drew their flow from underground springs and streams that had been carefully channeled and directed through a network of tunnels that extended far beyond the castle's immediate vicinity, their sources distributed across such wide areas that no enemy force could hope to block all the approaches simultaneously, even with comprehensive knowledge of the system's full extent. These water sources had been selected not only for their reliability and volume, but also for the discretion they provided. Their surface emergence points located in areas so remote and unremarkable that casual observers would never suspect their connection to the kingdom's most important stronghold. The engineering challenges involved in creating navigable waterways through solid rock had required the development of construction techniques that pushed the boundaries of contemporary knowledge in multiple disciplines, combining traditional stone-cutting methods with hydraulic principles that allowed for the precise control of water flow and depth throughout the system. The excavation work had been conducted in complete secrecy over a period of decades, with small teams of the most trusted workers laboring in shifts that ensured no individual possessed complete knowledge of the system's full scope and capabilities. The primary dock chamber had been hollowed out of the rock, according to specifications that balanced the practical requirements of boat storage and maintenance with the security demands of absolute concealment. Its dimensions calculated to accommodate vessels ranging from small reconnaissance craft to barges capable of transporting significant numbers of personnel and their essential supplies. The chamber's ceiling had been shaped according to acoustic principles that minimized the echoing effects that might otherwise carry sound to unwanted listeners, while providing adequate ventilation through carefully concealed air shafts. The water level within the dock had been maintained through a sophisticated system of locks and flow controls that allowed for adjustment according to seasonal variations in the external water sources, while ensuring that the harbour remained accessible regardless of weather conditions or external interference. These regulatory mechanisms had been designed to function automatically under normal circumstances, while providing manual override capabilities for emergency situations that might require rapid changes in water level or flow patterns. The boat storage facilities within the dock had included not only floating berths for active vessels, but also dry storage areas where boats could be maintained and repaired without exposure to external observation or interference. These maintenance areas had been equipped with specialized tools and materials necessary for the construction and repair of watercraft. Their inventories maintained according to standards that ensured the constant availability of essential supplies, even during extended periods of isolation or siege. The vessels kept in these hidden harbors had been designed specifically for the unique requirements of clandestine operations, their construction emphasizing speed, maneuverability, and silence over the cargo capacity or passenger accommodation that characterized conventional rivercraft. These boats had been built by craftsmen sworn to secrecy, their knowledge of the vessel's capabilities and intended uses protected by oaths that carried the most severe penalties for violation. The crews trained to operate these specialized craft had represented some of the most skilled and trusted personnel in the entire royal service, their selection based not only on their technical competence and physical capabilities, but also on psychological evaluations that assessed their ability to maintain absolute discretion under the most challenging circumstances. These operators had undergone training programs that prepared them for navigation in complete darkness, operation under hostile conditions, and the execution of complex evacuation procedures that might need to be implemented with minimal preparation time. The navigation systems developed for use in the underground waterways had included both conventional techniques adapted for the unique challenges of subterranean travel and innovative methods that took advantage of the stable environmental conditions found within the tunnel network. These systems had incorporated acoustic guidance techniques that allowed navigators to determine their position and heading through careful listening to water flow patterns and echo characteristics that varied in predictable ways throughout different sections of the waterway. The emergency protocols that governed the use of the dock facilities had been developed through careful analysis of potential crisis scenarios that might require the rapid evacuation of royal personnel or the covert insertion of rescue forces into the castle complex. These procedures had addressed everything from the sequence of actions necessary to prepare boats for immediate departure to the communication methods that would coordinate evacuation activities with other defensive measures being implemented throughout the castle. The concealment methods employed to hide the dock entrances from external detection had represented some of the most sophisticated camouflage techniques ever developed, combining natural landscaping with artificial features that rendered the waterway access points virtually invisible, even to observers who knew their approximate locations. These concealment measures had included false banks, artificial vegetation, and mechanical devices that could create the appearance of solid ground where navigable channels actually existed. The supply systems that supported the dock operations had been integrated with the castle's other logistical networks in ways that ensured adequate provisioning without creating obvious connections that might reveal the existence of the hidden facilities to unauthorized personnel. Food, water, fuel, and other essential supplies had been stored in climate-controlled chambers that maintained their quality over extended periods while remaining accessible for rapid loading during emergency operations. The strategic importance of the dock system had extended far beyond its immediate utility for evacuation purposes, providing capabilities that could support a wide range of covert operations, including intelligence gathering, communication with external allies, and the insertion of personnel behind enemy lines during siege situations. The boats and crews stationed at these facilities had been capable of operating throughout the kingdom's river and lake systems, their movements coordinated with other elements of the royal intelligence and security apparatus. The waterproof storage facilities located adjacent to the main dock chamber had been designed to preserve crucial documents, valuables, and other irreplaceable materials that would need to be evacuated along with royal personnel during emergency situations. These storage areas had included specialized containers and preservation systems that could maintain the integrity of their contents, even during rough water transportation or extended periods of adverse weather. The communication systems that connected the dock facilities with the castle's command centers had employed both conventional methods and more exotic techniques that took advantage of the unique acoustic properties of the underground waterways. These systems had included message tubes that could carry written communications through pneumatic pressure, speaking tubes that allowed for direct conversation across considerable distances, and coded signal systems that used variations in water flow to transmit information. The maintenance schedules that kept the dock facilities in constant readiness had required regular inspection and service of all mechanical systems, periodic replacement of perishable supplies, and ongoing training exercises that ensured personnel remained proficient in the complex procedures necessary for emergency operations. These maintenance activities had been conducted according to carefully planned rotations that minimized the risk of detection while ensuring that all systems remained functional at all times. The historical precedents that had informed the design of the dock system had included accounts of similar facilities constructed by other kingdoms facing comparable security challenges. Their experiences providing valuable lessons about both successful techniques and costly mistakes that needed to be avoided. The royal engineers responsible for the project had studied these precedents carefully while adapting their designs to the specific geographic and political conditions that characterized the Hyrulean situation. The integration of the dock system with the castle's other defensive measures had required careful coordination between different aspects of the overall security plan, ensuring that evacuation procedures would not interfere with military operations while providing fallback options that could be implemented if conventional defensive measures proved inadequate. These coordination requirements had necessitated regular joint training exercises that familiarized all relevant personnel with their roles and responsibilities during different types of emergency situations. The psychological effects of knowing about the existence of the escape routes had provided important morale benefits for royal personnel who might otherwise have felt trapped and helpless during siege situations. Their awareness that alternatives existed, helping to maintain the calm decision-making capabilities that would be essential for effective crisis management. This psychological security had been balanced against the risks associated with wider knowledge of the facilities, with access to information about the docks strictly limited according to security protocols. The seasonal variations that affected the operation of the waterway system had required adaptive procedures that took into account changes in water level, flow rate, and ice formation that could impede navigation during different times of the year. These variations had been carefully studied and documented to ensure that evacuation procedures could be modified as necessary to maintain effectiveness, regardless of seasonal conditions. The diplomatic implications of the dock system had extended beyond purely military considerations, providing capabilities that could support secret negotiations, covert meetings with foreign representatives, and other sensitive activities that required absolute privacy and security. The ability to transport personnel and communications without detection had proven valuable for maintaining diplomatic relationships and gathering intelligence about external threats to the kingdom. The legacy of the hidden docks had influenced the design of other defensive installations throughout the kingdom. Their successful integration of concealment and functionality, providing a model that had been adapted for use in other contexts where covert capabilities were required. The techniques developed for their construction and operation had been preserved in carefully guarded technical manuals that ensured their knowledge would be available for future applications. The spiritual significance of water in Hyrulean culture had added additional layers of meaning to the dock system beyond its purely practical functions, with the hidden waterways serving as symbols of the life-giving forces that sustained the kingdom and the flow of divine protection that connected the royal family with the goddess who watched over them. These symbolic associations had been reflected in the ceremonial aspects of the facilities, including shrines and ritual spaces where prayers could be offered for safe passage and divine guidance. The ultimate test of the dock system's effectiveness had come during the kingdom's darkest hour, when the evacuation procedures that had been planned and rehearsed for decades were finally implemented under the most challenging conditions imaginable. Though the facilities had functioned exactly as designed, providing secure escape routes for those who needed them most, their success had been measured not merely in terms of technical performance, but in their contribution to the preservation of hope and the continuation of resistance against seemingly impossible odds. The memory of these hidden harbors had lived on in the stories told by those who had witnessed their use, their tales serving as reminders that even the most desperate situations could be survived through careful preparation, technological innovation, and the courage to act decisively when circumstances demanded immediate action. The waterways that had once carried boats now carried memories, their quiet flows whispering stories of escape and survival that would inspire future generations facing their own seemingly insurmountable challenges. The royal chambers that occupied the uppermost levels of Hyrule Castle represented far more than mere living spaces for the kingdom's ruling family, their carefully designed rooms and interconnected suites serving as the intimate heart of royal power, where the most crucial decisions affecting the realm's destiny were made in the quiet hours between public ceremonies and state functions. These private sanctuaries had been crafted according to principles that balanced the need for personal comfort and family intimacy with the weightier requirements of governance and spiritual responsibility that defined the royal existence. Princess Zelda's private study had been positioned within the castle's eastern tower to take advantage of the morning light that streamed through tall windows, designed to provide optimal illumination for the detailed research, careful writing that consumed so many of her waking hours. The chamber had been arranged according to her specific preferences and working methods, its furniture and organizational systems, reflecting both her scholarly temperament and her practical understanding of the complex subjects that demanded her attention. The writing desk that dominated the study's central space had been crafted from wood harvested from trees that grew in the sacred forest, its surface bearing the accumulated marks and stains of countless hours spent in careful composition, analysis, and calculation. The desk's numerous drawers and compartments had been organized with methodical precision, each containing specific categories of materials and instruments that supported different aspects of her research into the ancient powers and mystical forces that shaped the kingdom's spiritual landscape. The walls of the study had been lined with custom-built shelving that displayed her personal collection of books, scrolls, and artifacts, their arrangement reflecting not merely aesthetic preferences but also the complex intellectual relationships that connected different aspects of her scholarly pursuits. The volumes that filled these shelves ranged from ancient prophecies written in scripts so archaic that only a handful of scholars could still decipher them to contemporary field reports from researchers investigating sites of mystical significance throughout the realm. The research materials that covered every available surface in the study told the story of an investigation that had consumed years of intensive effort, their contents revealing the princess's methodical approach to understanding powers that had remained largely dormant within her, despite her royal bloodline and divine heritage. Maps marked with locations of spiritual significance covered one wall, while another displayed genealogical charts that traced the inheritance of sacred abilities through generations of royal women. The experimental apparatus that occupied one corner of the study represented her attempts to understand the physical manifestations of spiritual power through careful observation and systematic testing, though these efforts had yielded more questions than answers despite the sophisticated measuring devices and recording systems she had assembled. The instruments themselves had been crafted by the kingdom's finest artisans, working according to specifications that blended traditional craftsmanship with theoretical principles derived from ancient Sheikah technical manuals. The personal journals that documented her daily efforts to awaken her latent abilities filled an entire bookcase, their pages revealing a mixture of scientific methodology and emotional vulnerability that spoke to both the intellectual rigor she brought to her studies and the profound personal frustration she experienced when her efforts failed to produce measurable results. These private writings contained not only detailed descriptions of her experimental procedures, but also honest assessments of her emotional state and philosophical reflections on the nature of divine power. The correspondence files that occupied another section of the study contained letters exchanged with scholars, researchers, and spiritual advisors throughout the kingdom and beyond. their contents revealing the extensive network of expertise she had assembled in her quest for understanding. These communications included technical discussions of theoretical principles, requests for access to rare manuscripts and artifacts, and increasingly desperate appeals for guidance from anyone who might possess knowledge relevant to her struggles. The meditation space that had been created near the study's eastern windows provided a quiet area where the princess could attempt the contemplative practices that various advisors had recommended for spiritual development, though the cushions and prayer mats in this area showed far less wear than the desk chair where she spent most of her working hours. The small shrine that occupied the center of this space held offerings and ceremonial objects that had been blessed by the kingdom's highest religious authorities, their presence serving as both spiritual focus and constant reminder of the expectations that weighed upon her shoulders. The collection of ancient artifacts that lined the study's shelves included items whose mystical properties had been documented in historical records, but whose practical application remained mysterious despite years of careful examination and experimentation. These relics ranged from crystals that glowed with their own inner light to mechanical devices whose purposes could only be guessed at based on their construction and the contexts in which they had been discovered. The astronomical instruments that occupied a specially designed cabinet near the windows reflected the princess's understanding that celestial observations had played crucial roles in the spiritual practices of previous generations. Though her own attempts to correlate stellar movements with the awakening of sacred powers had proven as frustrating as her other research efforts, these precision devices included armillary spheres, star charts, and calculation tablets that had been used by royal astronomers for centuries. The king's private chambers occupied the castle's central tower, their position chosen to provide visual command of the surrounding landscape, while ensuring that the monarch could maintain awareness of activities throughout the fortress, even during his hours of rest and personal reflection. These rooms had been designed to serve multiple functions, providing not only comfortable living space but also secure areas where the most sensitive governmental business could be conducted away from the formal throne room and public ceremonial spaces. The royal bedroom had been furnished with pieces that represented the finest craftsmanship available within the kingdom's borders, their elegant lines and precious materials reflecting the dignity of the royal office while providing the comfort necessary for restorative sleep after days filled with the physical and emotional demands of leadership. The great bed that dominated the room had been constructed according to specifications that took into account both ceremonial requirements and practical needs, its frame carved with symbols representing the divine mandate that legitimized royal authority. The private office adjacent to the bedroom served as the location where the king conducted his most confidential business, its secure environment, ensuring that sensitive documents and delicate negotiations could be handled without risk of unwanted observation or interference. The desk and filing systems in this room contained materials that represented the full scope of royal administrative responsibilities, from routine governmental correspondence to crisis management plans that addressed potential threats to the kingdom's security and stability. The personal library that occupied one wall of the office held volumes that had been selected specifically for their relevance to the challenges of royal leadership, their contents ranging from historical accounts of previous monarchs' decisions to theoretical treatises on governance and diplomatic strategy. These books showed clear evidence of regular use, their margins filled with notes and observations that revealed the depth of thought the king brought to his analysis of complex problems and policy decisions. The map room that connected to the office contained cartographic materials that provided comprehensive coverage of the kingdom's territory and strategic situation. Their detailed representations of topography, settlements, and transportation networks serving as essential tools for both military planning and administrative coordination. The great table that occupied the center of this room had been designed specifically for the display and analysis of large-scale maps, its surface equipped with measuring devices and calculation aids that supported precise strategic planning. The communication systems that connected the royal chambers with other parts of the castle included both conventional methods and more sophisticated techniques that allowed for rapid transmission of information during emergency situations. These systems included speaking tubes that provided direct voice communication with key locations throughout the fortress, mechanical signaling devices that could alert guards and staff to changing security conditions, and coded message systems that ensured sensitive information could be transmitted without risk of interception. The security measures that protected the royal chambers had been designed according to principles that balanced accessibility with protection, ensuring that the king could maintain normal family and administrative functions while remaining safe from potential threats. These protections included both visible deterrents and concealed defensive systems, their combined effect creating multiple layers of security that could function independently or in coordination depending on the nature of any threat that might emerge. The sacred spaces that had been integrated into the royal living areas reflected the spiritual dimensions of royal authority, providing locations where private prayers could be offered and ceremonial obligations could be fulfilled without the formality and public exposure associated with the castle's main religious facilities. These intimate shrines and prayer alcoves had been designed according to traditional specifications that ensured their effectiveness for spiritual purposes, while maintaining the privacy necessary for personal devotion. The family dining area that connected the king's chambers with those reserved for other members of the royal household provided a space where informal meals and family discussions could take place away from the ceremonial atmosphere of the Great Hall. This room had been furnished with pieces that emphasized comfort and intimacy rather than formal grandeur, creating an environment where family relationships could be maintained despite the public demands of royal office. The guest chambers that had been designated for use by visiting dignitaries and important advisors reflected the kingdom's commitment to diplomatic hospitality while maintaining appropriate security protocols. These rooms had been appointed with furnishings and amenities that demonstrated respect for distinguished visitors, while ensuring that their presence within the castle could be monitored and managed according to security requirements. The nursery areas that had been established for royal children provided safe and comfortable environments for the youngest members of the royal family, their design taking into account both the special security needs associated with protecting potential heirs and the developmental requirements of children who would eventually assume positions of leadership and responsibility. These spaces had been equipped with educational materials and recreational facilities that supported both intellectual development and physical growth. The private archives that contained personal documents and family records occupied secure storage areas within the royal chambers. Their contents, including everything from birth certificates and genealogical records to private correspondence and personal memorabilia that help preserve the human dimensions of royal existence across the generations. These materials had been organized according to systems that ensured both preservation and accessibility while maintaining appropriate confidentiality. The servant quarters that supported the operation of the royal chambers had been designed to provide comfortable accommodations for the personal staff whose discretion and dedication made possible the smooth functioning of royal domestic life. These areas included sleeping chambers, workspaces, and storage facilities that allowed servants to perform their duties efficiently while maintaining the privacy and security standards necessary for service within the most sensitive areas of the castle. The integration of the royal chambers with the castle's broader defensive and administrative systems required careful coordination between personal needs and official responsibilities, ensuring that the king and his family could maintain normal domestic routines, while remaining accessible for governmental business and prepared for emergency situations. This integration had been achieved through architectural solutions that provided multiple circulation routes and communication options, while preserving the dignity and privacy appropriate to royal living spaces. The historical evolution of the royal chambers reflected changes in both royal lifestyle preferences and security requirements across the generations, with each monarch adding personal touches and functional improvements that enhanced the spaces while preserving their essential character and purpose. These modifications had created rooms that served as repositories of royal history, their accumulated furnishings and decorative elements telling the story of the dynasty through material culture and personal artifacts. The ultimate significance of the royal chambers lay not merely in their function as living spaces, but in their role as the private foundation upon which public leadership rested, providing the security, comfort, and spiritual resources necessary for individuals to bear the enormous responsibilities associated with royal office. These intimate spaces had witnessed the personal struggles and triumphs that shaped public policy, the family moments that sustained monarchs through periods of crisis, and the private devotions that connected earthly authority with divine mandate across the generations. The lockup that lay buried deep within the castle's foundation levels represented one of the most formidable and carefully designed proving grounds ever constructed for the testing of aspiring knights. Its stone chambers and reinforced barriers, serving not merely as a prison for dangerous creatures, but as the ultimate examination space, where courage, skill, and determination were measured against opponents that could easily claim the lives of those found wanting in any essential quality required for service in the royal guard. The chamber itself had been carved from the living rock of the castle's foundation, according to specifications that balanced the practical requirements of containing extremely dangerous creatures with the ceremonial needs of conducting formal trials that would determine the worthiness of candidates for knighthood. The walls rose to heights that prevented even the most agile prisoners from reaching potential escape routes, while providing adequate space for combat encounters that required room for complex maneuvering and tactical thinking. The stone blocks that formed these walls had been cut and fitted with mathematical precision, their surfaces bearing the scars and impact marks left by countless battles fought within the chamber's confines across the generations. These battle-worn stones told stories of desperate struggles between aspiring knights and creatures whose strength and ferocity had tested every aspect of combat training and personal courage that the candidates had developed through years of preparation and instruction. The heavy chains that hung from iron brackets set deep into the stone walls bore witness to the primary function these chambers had served throughout the castle's long history, their massive links and specialized restraining mechanisms designed to contain creatures whose physical capabilities far exceeded those of normal beasts. These restraining systems had been engineered according to principles that took into account not only the brute strength of their intended prisoners, but also their intelligence and cunning, creating containment solutions that could adapt to different types of threats. The central area of the chamber had been left deliberately clear of obstacles or defensive positions, creating an arena where combat encounters could unfold according to their natural dynamics, without artificial advantages or disadvantages that might compromise the validity of the trials being conducted. This open space had been designed to test not only fighting skills but also tactical thinking, forcing candidates to rely on their training and improvise strategies rather than environmental features that might mask deficiencies in their preparation. The lighting systems that illuminated the chamber had been positioned to provide clear visibility throughout the space, while eliminating shadows where either combatants or observers might gain unfair advantages during the trials. The steady glow cast by oil lamps and braziers had been calibrated to reproduce the lighting conditions that knights might encounter during actual combat situations, ensuring that successful candidates would be prepared for the visual challenges associated with real warfare. The ventilation systems that served the lockup had been designed not only to provide adequate air circulation for the health of prisoners and trial participants, but also to remove the smoke and fumes that might be generated during combat, encounters involving fire-based weapons, or magical attacks. These atmospheric management systems had included both natural airflow through carefully positioned openings and mechanical circulation devices that could maintain air quality even during extended periods of intense activity. The observation areas that had been built into the upper levels of the chamber allowed senior knights, royal officials, and other authorized personnel to witness the trials being conducted while remaining safely separated from the dangers inherent in close combat with powerful creatures. These viewing positions had been constructed according to defensive principles that protected observers while providing clear sight lines for accurate evaluation of candidate performance during critical moments. The creature that had been housed within the lockup's secure confines represented one of the most dangerous types of undead beings known to the kingdom's monster hunters and combat specialists, its presence within the castle serving both practical and ceremonial purposes that reflected the serious nature of the trials conducted in these depths. The Hinox that had originally occupied the chamber had been captured alive during a military expedition that had required the coordinated efforts of an entire company of veteran soldiers working together to overcome its massive strength and primitive cunning. The capture and transportation of such a creature had presented logistical challenges that had pushed the boundaries of the kingdom's monster handling capabilities, requiring specialized equipment and techniques that had been developed specifically for dealing with giants whose size and strength made conventional restraint methods inadequate. The procedures employed in bringing the creature to the castle had involved careful planning that took into account not only the physical demands of transportation, but also the security requirements necessary to prevent escape during the Crete journey. The feeding and maintenance systems that had been established to keep the captive creature healthy and combat-ready had represented ongoing investments in both resources and specialized knowledge, with handlers who understood the dietary requirements and behavioral patterns necessary for maintaining such a dangerous prisoner in captivity. These support systems had been designed to function reliably across extended periods, while minimizing the risks to castle personnel responsible for their operation. The transformation of the living Hinox into the Stulnox that had eventually come to occupy the chamber had resulted from the natural progression of undeath that affected creatures held in captivity for extended periods, their life force gradually fading until only animated bone and malevolent spirit remained to continue their existence. This transformation had actually enhanced the creature's value as a trial opponent, as undead beings possessed certain advantages and vulnerabilities that provided different types of challenges for aspiring knights to overcome. The Stulnox that had ultimately faced trial candidates possessed not only the massive physical strength associated with its giant heritage, but also the supernatural resilience and tactical unpredictability that characterized powerful, undead creatures. Its ability to continue fighting, even after suffering what would be mortal wounds to living beings, had created trial conditions that tested not only combat skills, but also the psychological fortitude necessary for facing opponents that defied normal understanding of injury and defeat. The combat techniques that had proven most effective against the Stulnox required combinations of conventional weapons skills and tactical knowledge specific to fighting undead opponents. forcing trial candidates to demonstrate mastery of specialized approaches that would serve them well when facing similar threats in actual military service. These techniques included not only direct combat methods but also strategies for exploiting the creature's supernatural nature and the specific vulnerabilities associated with its undead state. The weapons provided to trial candidates had been carefully selected to offer appropriate levels of challenge, while ensuring that skilled and prepared knights would possess the tools necessary for victory against their monstrous opponent. These armaments had included not only conventional swords and shields, but also specialized equipment designed for fighting undead creatures, their effectiveness depending entirely on the skill and knowledge of those who wielded them. The trial procedures that governed combat encounters within the lockup had been developed through generations of experience with knightly testing, their protocols ensuring both fairness in evaluation and appropriate safety measures for all participants. These procedures had addressed everything from the sequence of events that preceded actual combat to the criteria used for determining success or failure in encounters that might end in various ways depending on the performance of individual candidates. The evaluation systems employed by observing officials had been based on comprehensive understanding of the qualities and capabilities that distinguished truly effective knights from those who possessed only superficial combat skills. Their assessment criteria, taking into account not only immediate combat performance, but also evidence of the character traits and intellectual capabilities necessary for long-term success in royal service. The reward system that provided successful candidates with ceremonial weapons and equipment had been designed to recognize achievement, while also providing practical tools that would serve knights throughout their careers in royal service. The Hylian shield that served as the ultimate prize for those who defeated the Stalnox in single combat represented not merely a trophy, but a functional piece of equipment whose protective capabilities had been proven through generations of use by the kingdom's most elite warriors. The symbolic significance of the Hylian shield extended far beyond its practical utility as a defensive weapon, its design and construction representing the highest ideals of knightly service and the connection between individual courage and the collective security of the realm. The shield bore heraldic devices that told the story of the kingdom's military traditions, while serving as visible reminders of the oaths and obligations that bound knights to their royal duties. The manufacturing process that created these legendary shields had involved the collaboration of the kingdom's finest craftsmen, working with materials that had been blessed by religious authorities and treated according to techniques that enhance both their physical properties and their spiritual significance. Each shield represented not only superior craftsmanship, but also the accumulated knowledge and tradition that had been passed down through generations of military service. The testing and quality assurance procedures that ensured each shield met the standards required for presentation to successful trial candidates had involved rigorous evaluation of both defensive capabilities and symbolic appropriateness, with master armorers responsible for verifying that every aspect of construction met the exacting requirements associated with such prestigious awards. The historical precedents that had established the tradition of using captured monsters for knightly trials extended back to the earliest periods of the kingdom's military development, their evolution reflecting changing understanding of both effective training methods and the types of threats that knights might face during actual military service. These precedents had been documented in military manuals and ceremonial records that preserved both the practical knowledge and cultural significance associated with the trial system. The alternative trial methods that had been developed for situations where suitable monster opponents were not available had included other forms of combat testing that could evaluate knightly capabilities while maintaining the ceremonial significance associated with formal advancement within the military hierarchy. These alternatives had been designed to provide equivalent challenges while adapting to changing circumstances and resource availability. The integration of the lockup trials with other aspects of knightly training had created comprehensive development programs that prepared candidates not only for the specific challenges associated with fighting powerful monsters, but also for the broader range of skills and knowledge necessary for effective service in various military and ceremonial roles. These integrated programs had ensured that successful knights possessed well-rounded capabilities rather than narrow specializations that might prove inadequate in unpredictable situations. The psychological preparation that preceded lockup trials had addressed the mental and emotional challenges associated with facing opponents whose capabilities far exceeded those encountered during normal training exercises, helping candidates develop the confidence and tactical thinking necessary for success in encounters where failure could result in death or serious injury. This preparation had included both theoretical instruction and practical exercises designed to build the psychological resilience necessary for effective performance under extreme stress. The medical support systems that had been established to provide emergency treatment for trial participants had been staffed by healers with specialized experience in treating injuries caused by monster attacks. Their knowledge and equipment specifically adapted to address the unique types of damage associated with combat against creatures possessing supernatural strength and unusual attack methods. The legacy of the lockup trials had influenced military training practices throughout the kingdom, their success in producing effective knights, serving as a model for other testing systems that sought to evaluate combat capabilities under realistic conditions. The principles developed through generations of experience with these trials had been incorporated into training manuals and instructional programs that preserved their essential insights while adapting them to changing military needs and circumstances. The Royal Ancient Technology Laboratory that had been established within the deepest levels of Hyrule Castle represented perhaps the most ambitious and comprehensive research facility ever created for the systematic investigation of ancient Sheikah artifacts and installations. Its sophisticated equipment and carefully controlled environments, providing the kingdom's finest scholars and technicians with unprecedented opportunities to unlock the secrets of a technological tradition that had surpassed contemporary understanding in virtually every measurable aspect of scientific and engineering achievement. The laboratory complex had been constructed according to specifications that balanced the practical requirements of handling extremely advanced and potentially dangerous equipment with the security demands of protecting both researchers and the broader castle population from the unpredictable effects that might result from experimental work involving technologies whose operating principles remained only partially understood, despite years of intensive study and analysis. The main research hall had been excavated from solid rock, according to dimensions that provided adequate space for the examination and testing of artifacts, ranging from small handheld devices to massive mechanical systems, whose complexity defied easy categorization, while environmental controls maintained atmospheric conditions that preserved both the integrity of ancient materials and the comfort of researchers who might need to work for extended periods in the underground facility. The specimen storage systems that occupied one entire wall of the laboratory had been designed to accommodate artifacts of widely varying sizes, compositions, and preservation requirements, their specialized containment units providing precisely controlled environments that could maintain optimal conditions for materials ranging from crystalline energy storage devices to mechanical components whose metallurgical properties had never been successfully replicated using contemporary technique. The testing equipment that filled the laboratory's central workspace represented the finest precision instruments that the kingdom's craftsmen could produce according to specifications developed through collaboration between traditional scholars and the few remaining Sheikah technical specialists whose ancestral knowledge provided crucial insights into the proper handling and analysis of their people's ancient creations. The Guardian research programs that had been established within the laboratory had focused primarily on understanding the mechanical and mystical systems that enabled these ancient war machines to function with such devastating effectiveness. Their investigations encompassing everything from the basic engineering principles underlying Guardian mobility to the energy weapon systems that could reduce solid stone to vapor in mere seconds. The first Guardian specimens that had been brought to the laboratory for detailed examination had been discovered in various states of preservation and completeness, some having been excavated from underground storage chambers in nearly perfect condition, while others had been recovered from battlefields where centuries of exposure to weather and scavengers had reduced them to partial assemblies that required careful reconstruction before meaningful analysis could begin. The disassembly procedures that had been developed for examining Guardian components had required the creation of specialized tools and techniques that could safely separate mechanical systems whose tolerances and materials exceeded anything found in contemporary engineering practice. Their precision-fitted joints and advanced metallurgy presenting challenges that pushed the boundaries of available expertise and equipment. The documentation systems employed by the research teams had been designed to record not only the physical characteristics and operational parameters of discovered components, but also the experimental procedures and theoretical hypotheses that guided their investigations, creating comprehensive records that could support continued research even when individual specialists left the program, or when institutional knowledge needed to be preserved across changes in leadership and priorities. The power source investigations that had been conducted within the laboratory had focused on understanding the energy systems that enabled Guardians to operate independently for extended periods without external fuel or maintenance, their self-contained power plants representing technological achievements that seemed to violate established understanding of energy, conservation, and storage principles. The weapons research programs had attempted to reverse engineer the beam projection systems that gave Guardians their primary offensive capability, their investigations revealing construction techniques and materials, science principles that remained beyond the reach of contemporary manufacturing capabilities despite detailed analysis of recovered components and careful study of operational parameters. The mobility systems that enabled Guardians to traverse virtually any terrain with remarkable speed and agility had provided another focus for laboratory research. Their sophisticated leg mechanisms and balance control systems demonstrating engineering solutions to problems that contemporary designers had barely begun to understand, much less solve using available materials and manufacturing techniques. The artificial intelligence systems that governed Guardian behavior and decision-making had represented perhaps the most mysterious and challenging aspect of the research program. Their underlying principles involving combinations of mechanical computation and mystical influence that defied analysis using conventional investigative methods and theoretical frameworks. The control interface studies that had been conducted within the laboratory had examined the methods by which Guardians could be programmed and directed, their findings revealing command systems that combined physical manipulation of mechanical controls with mystical communication techniques that required specialized knowledge and training to implement effectively. The defensive systems research had investigated the armor and protective mechanisms that made Guardians extremely difficult to damage using conventional weapons. Their advanced metallurgy and energy shielding systems providing protection levels that exceeded anything achievable using contemporary materials and construction techniques. The experimental protocols that governed all research activities within the laboratory had been developed to ensure both the safety of personnel and the preservation of irreplaceable artifacts. Their comprehensive safety procedures, addressing everything from proper handling techniques for dangerous materials to emergency response measures for containing potentially catastrophic equipment malfunctions. The collaboration networks that had been established between the Royal Laboratory and Sheikah research facilities throughout the kingdom had created information-sharing systems that maximized the effectiveness of limited expertise, while ensuring that crucial discoveries could be verified and developed through independent investigation and cross-referencing of experimental results. The theoretical framework development that had been pursued alongside practical research had attempted to create comprehensive models that could explain Guardian operation according to principles that integrated mechanical engineering with the mystical forces, their mathematical formulations representing some of the most advanced analytical work ever undertaken within the kingdom's academic institutions. The practical application programs that had been established within the laboratory had focused on developing contemporary technologies that could benefit from principles derived from ancient Sheikah engineering, their projects encompassing everything from improved metallurgy and precision manufacturing to energy storage systems and mechanical automation that could enhance various aspects of royal administration and military capability. The training systems that had been implemented for laboratory personnel had addressed both the technical skills necessary for working with advanced artifacts and the safety procedures essential for preventing accidents that could endanger both individual researchers and the broader facility. Their comprehensive instruction programs, ensuring that all staff possessed adequate knowledge and preparation for their assigned responsibilities. The security protocols that protected the laboratory from unauthorized access had been designed to prevent both deliberate espionage and accidental exposure to dangerous technologies. Their multi-layered approach, combining physical barriers with administrative controls and surveillance systems that could detect and respond to various types of security threats. The incident response procedures that had been established for handling equipment, malfunctions, and experimental accidents had been based on careful analysis of potential failure modes and emergency scenarios. Their comprehensive planning, addressing everything from minor equipment damage to catastrophic containment failures that might threaten the castle's overall security and safety. The historical documentation programs that had been maintained within the laboratory had preserved detailed records of all research activities and discoveries, their archives providing both institutional memory for continued investigations and historical evidence of the scientific achievements accomplished through royal support of advanced technological research. The integration of laboratory findings with military planning and strategic decision-making had created feedback systems that ensured research discoveries could be translated into practical applications that enhanced the kingdom's defensive capabilities and overall security posture. Their implementation requiring close coordination between research personnel and military leaders who understood both the potential benefits and limitations of available technologies. The ethical considerations that had been addressed by laboratory administrators had included questions about the appropriate use of potentially dangerous technologies and the responsibilities associated with developing capabilities that could fundamentally alter the balance of power between different groups and regions. Their philosophical discussions, reflecting sophisticated understanding of the broader implications associated with advanced technological development. The resource allocation systems that had been established for supporting laboratory operations had balanced the substantial costs associated with advanced research against competing demands for royal funding and attention. their efficiency measures ensuring that limited resources were used effectively while maintaining adequate support for the most promising and important research programs. The knowledge preservation systems that had been implemented within the laboratory had been designed to ensure that crucial discoveries and techniques would survive even if the facility itself were compromised or destroyed. Their redundant storage and documentation methods, creating multiple copies of essential information that could support reconstruction of research capabilities under adverse circumstances. The international implications of the laboratory's research had included both the potential benefits of sharing discoveries with allied kingdoms and the security risks associated with advanced technologies falling into the hands of potentially hostile powers. Their diplomatic considerations requiring careful balancing of scientific cooperation against national security interests and strategic advantages. The ultimate significance of the Royal Ancient Technology Laboratory had extended far beyond its immediate research achievements, representing a comprehensive attempt to bridge the knowledge gap between contemporary understanding and the advanced capabilities demonstrated by ancient Sheikah technology, while creating institutional frameworks that could support continued investigation and development even when faced with resource limitations and changing political circumstances that might affect royal priorities and funding availability. The sanctum of Hyrule Castle occupied the highest and most sacred chamber within the entire fortress complex, its soaring walls and magnificent architecture serving not merely as the formal seat of royal authority, but as the physical manifestation of the divine mandate that connected earthly governance with the celestial powers that governed the fundamental order of creation itself. This was the throne room in its most exalted form, a space where the accumulated traditions of centuries had been given tangible expression through architectural grandeur and symbolic decoration that elevated every royal ceremony to the level of sacred ritual. The great hall that housed the throne rose to heights that seemed to challenge the very heavens. Its vaulted ceiling, supported by columns whose proportions had been calculated according to mathematical principles that created both structural stability and acoustic properties that enhanced the majesty of royal proclamations and ceremonial proceedings. The stones that formed these mighty pillars had been quarried from the most distant mountains of the realm, each block selected not only for its strength and beauty, but also for the symbolic significance of its origins, in locations that represented different aspects of the kingdom's diverse geography and cultural heritage. The floor of the sanctum had been constructed as a masterwork of artistic and mystical design, its surface inlaid with precious stones and rare metals that formed patterns, representing the fundamental forces that governed both the natural world and the supernatural realms that existed beyond normal human perception. The centerpiece of this magnificent floor was a great representation of the Triforce itself, its three triangular sections rendered in gold so pure that it seemed to glow with its own inner light. Their arrangement, creating a focal point that drew the eye inevitably toward the throne that occupied the chamber's place of highest honor. The throne itself represented perhaps the finest achievement of the royal craftsman's art, its construction requiring the collaboration of master carvers, metalworkers, and gem cutters, whose combined skills had created a seat of power that embodied both the dignity of royal office and the spiritual authority that legitimized monarchical rule. The chair had been carved from a single piece of ancient wood that had been harvested from trees growing in the most sacred groves of the kingdom, their timber treated with preservative compounds and blessed with ceremonies that enhanced both its physical durability and its mystical significance. The high back of the throne had been decorated with intricate carvings that told the story of the royal dynasty through symbolic representations that required extensive knowledge of heraldic tradition and dynastic history to fully appreciate. their flowing lines and complex interweaving, creating visual narratives that connected the present monarch with the accumulated authority and divine blessing of all their predecessors. These decorative elements included not only representations of significant historical events, but also prophetic symbols that spoke of the eternal nature of royal responsibility and the cyclical patterns that governed the relationship between light and darkness in the world. The armrests of the throne had been shaped to accommodate the ceremonial regalia that symbolized different aspects of royal power, their surfaces bearing mounting points for the crown, scepter, and other sacred objects that were employed during the most important state ceremonies. These functional elements had been integrated into the overall design so seamlessly that they appeared to be natural extensions of the throne's basic structure, rather than additions that had been imposed upon a pre-existing framework. The cushions and coverings that provided comfort for the monarch during extended ceremonial proceedings had been crafted from the finest fabrics available within the kingdom's borders, their rich colors and luxurious textures serving both practical and symbolic purposes that reinforced the dignity of royal office, while ensuring that long periods of ceremonial duty could be endured without physical discomfort that might compromise the effectiveness of royal performance. The dais that elevated the throne above the main floor of the chamber had been constructed according to specifications that provided optimal sight lines for both the monarch and the assembled courtiers who attended royal ceremonies, while its height and position created acoustic effects that ensured royal words could be heard clearly throughout the vast space, even when spoken at normal conversational volumes. The steps that led up to this elevated platform had been carved with symbols representing the ascending levels of spiritual authority that culminated in the divine mandate that legitimized royal rule. The great windows that illuminated the sanctum had been positioned and designed to take advantage of the sun's movement across the sky, creating lighting effects that changed throughout the day in ways that enhanced different types of ceremonial proceedings and administrative functions. The colored glass that filled these windows had been crafted by artisans whose techniques had been refined across generations of service to the royal court. Their mastery of light and color, creating visual environments that supported both the practical requirements of governance and the emotional impact necessary for effective ceremony. The tapestries and banners that adorned the walls of the chamber told the complete history of the kingdom through visual narratives that combined artistic excellence with historical accuracy, their carefully researched scenes and symbolic elements serving both decorative and educational purposes that ensured royal ceremonies took place within contexts that reinforced the continuity and legitimacy of dynastic rule. These textile masterpieces had been created by workshops that specialized in royal commissions, their artists working from historical documents and archaeological evidence to ensure accuracy in their representation of past events and cultural traditions. The ceremonial weapons and regalia that were displayed within the sanctum represented not only the military might that supported royal authority, but also the sacred nature of the king's role as protector of the realm and defender of the divine order that governed human society. These artifacts included both functional weapons that had been used in actual battles and ceremonial pieces, whose symbolic significance exceeded their practical utility, their combined presence creating an environment that celebrated both the martial and spiritual dimensions of royal responsibility. The acoustical properties of the chamber had been engineered with extraordinary precision to ensure that royal proclamations, ceremonial music, and other important sounds could be heard clearly throughout the space while maintaining the dignity and solemnity appropriate to the most sacred functions of governance. The curved walls and carefully calculated ceiling heights had been designed to eliminate echoes and dead zones while enhancing the natural resonance of the human voice and musical instruments employed during royal ceremonies. The ventilation systems that maintained air quality within the sanctum had been designed to function effectively even when the chamber was filled to capacity with courtiers, dignitaries, and other attendees at major state functions. Their sophisticated air circulation mechanisms, ensuring comfort for all participants, while maintaining the environmental conditions necessary for the preservation of valuable furnishings and decorative elements. The lighting systems that supplemented natural illumination included both conventional oil lamps and torches, and more sophisticated devices that employed crystalline elements to create steady, clean light that enhanced the beauty of the chamber's decorative elements, while providing adequate visibility for the complex ceremonial proceedings that required precise timing and coordination. These artificial lighting systems had been positioned to avoid creating harsh shadows or glare that might interfere with the visual impact of royal ceremonies. The security systems that protected the sanctum had been designed according to principles that balanced the accessibility necessary for normal governmental functions with the protection required for the kingdom's most important ceremonial space. Their multiple layers of physical barriers and surveillance systems, ensuring that royal proceedings could continue safely, even during periods of heightened external threat or internal instability. The communication systems that connected the throne room with other parts of the castle included both visible and concealed methods for transmitting information and coordinating activities. Their sophisticated signaling mechanisms, allowing for the seamless integration of ceremonial proceedings with ongoing administrative functions and security operations that continued throughout the fortress complex. The storage systems that preserved the ceremonial objects and regalia employed during royal functions had been designed to maintain optimal environmental conditions for materials ranging from ancient textiles and manuscripts to precious metals and gemstones that required specialized care to prevent deterioration. Their climate-controlled chambers, ensuring that irreplaceable artifacts would remain available for use across multiple generations of royal service. The preparation areas that supported major ceremonial functions included chambers where participants could don ceremonial garments, organize processional elements, and conduct final rehearsals of complex procedures that required precise timing and coordination to achieve their intended effects. These support spaces had been positioned to allow for smooth transitions between different phases of elaborate ceremonies while maintaining appropriate separation between different groups of participants according to their roles and levels of access. The record-keeping systems that documented royal ceremonies and official proceedings included both traditional written accounts and more sophisticated methods for preserving the visual and auditory aspects of important events. Their comprehensive documentation, ensuring that precedents could be maintained and ceremonial traditions could be transmitted accurately across changes in royal personnel and administrative structure. The integration of the sanctum with the castle's broader defensive systems had required careful coordination between ceremonial requirements and military necessities, ensuring that royal functions could continue safely even during periods of external threat, while maintaining the dignity and effectiveness that characterized proper royal ceremony. These defensive measures included both visible deterrents and concealed protective systems that could function without interfering with normal ceremonial activities. The symbolic relationships between different elements within the chamber had been designed according to principles that reinforced the theological and philosophical foundations of royal authority. Their complex interconnections, creating visual and conceptual frameworks that supported both immediate ceremonial impact and deeper understanding of the principles that legitimized monarchical governance within the context of divine will and cosmic order. The maintenance systems that preserved the chamber's magnificent condition required ongoing attention from specialists who understood both the technical requirements of caring for precious materials and the ceremonial significance of maintaining environments that reflected the dignity and authority of royal office. These maintenance activities had been scheduled and coordinated to minimize disruption of normal royal functions, while ensuring that all elements of the chamber remained in optimal condition for ceremonial use. The historical evolution of the sanctum reflected changes in both royal ceremonial practices and theological understanding across the centuries, with each generation of monarchs adding elements that enhanced the chamber's effectiveness while preserving its essential character and symbolic significance. These accumulated modifications had created a space that served as a repository of royal history while remaining functionally effective for contemporary governmental and ceremonial requirements. The ultimate significance of the sanctum lay not merely in its function as a throne room, but in its role as the physical embodiment of the principles that governed the relationship between divine authority and earthly power, providing a space where the theoretical foundations of royal legitimacy were given tangible expression through architectural grandeur and ceremonial magnificence that elevated governmental functions to the level of sacred ritual and cosmic significance. And so we reach the end of our long journey through the sacred stones and hallowed halls of Hyrule Castle, where every corridor whispers of ancient wisdom, and every chamber holds memories of both triumph and tragedy that have shaped the destiny of an entire kingdom across the turning of countless ages. The castle stands now as it has always stood, not merely as a fortress of stone and mortar, but as a living testament to the enduring power of hope and the unbreakable bonds that connect one generation to the next through shared purpose and common devotion. Though the years have brought changes that no architect could have foreseen when the first stones were laid upon their sacred foundation, though battles have raged within these walls, and sorrow has walked these corridors alongside joy, the essential spirit that gave birth to this magnificent structure remains as strong and vibrant as ever. The stones themselves seem to remember the laughter of children playing in gardens now overgrown, the whispered conferences of wise counselors planning for futures they would never see, the solemn ceremonies that bound ruler to subject and subject to crown through bonds stronger than any earthly chain. In the deep places where ancient Sheikah wisdom still glows with patient light, in the high towers where royal chambers await the return of their rightful occupants, in the libraries where knowledge sleeps but never dies, the castle maintains its eternal vigil over a kingdom that has endured far more than stone and timber should ever be asked to bear. Yet endure it has, and endure it shall. For the strength that built these walls came not from human ambition alone, but from the understanding that some things are worth preserving, no matter what trials may come. The spirits of all who served within these walls with honor and devotion continue their watch. Their presence felt not as sorrow for what has been lost, but as gentle encouragement for what may yet be restored. The chambers may be empty now. The halls may echo with silence rather than the bustle of daily life. But the love that filled these spaces has not departed with those who once walked here. It remains, patient as stone, enduring as starlight, waiting for the day when new voices will join the ancient chorus of those who understand that service to something greater than oneself is the highest calling any soul can answer. Sleep now, gentle dreamer, in the knowledge that even in ruins, even in silence, even in the longest darkness, the castle keeps its watch over the land it was built to protect, its stones holding fast to promises made in ages past, and dreams that reach toward ages yet to come.